Let's take a look at another example. Y equals a negative 2 cosine 3x plus pi. Let's factor out the interior function. Y equals a negative 2 cosine. Factoring a 3 out gives me x plus pi over 3. We can check this by distributing the 3 back in. 3 times x gives us 3x, and 3 times pi over 3 gives us pi. Let's continue with the procedures of finding the amplitude, which is the constant in front of the function, which is the absolute value of a negative 2, which is 2. The period, which is going to be 2 pi divided by b, and here b is the term we factored out, which is 3. So my period is going to be 2 pi over 3, and then my quarter point is going to be my period times 1/4, which is going to give me 2 pi over 3 times 1 over 4, which is going to give us 2 pi over 12 or pi over 6. Let's continue by graphing the function. Our y-axis and our x-axis. Our amplitude is going to be 2. And I'm going to count our quarter points by 1/6 or pi over 6. So pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, which is pi over 3, 3 pi over 6, or pi over 2, and the last one, 4 pi over 6, which is my period, because that would be 2 pi over 3. I'm graphing cosine, so this is going to start off the origin, and my amplitude is a negative 2, so my first quarter point will be at a negative 2, and then I'll continue with 0, positive 2, 0, and finally negative 2. And then I'll complete a smooth curve through those points. And that function would represent y equals a negative 2 cosine 3x without my phase shift of pi over 3. Now what I want to do is to graph the function with the phase shift. So what I need to do is to set the interior function x plus pi over 3 equal to 0 and solve. X equals a negative pi over 3. Therefore, my function quarter points are going to shift to the left by the amount of pi over 3. So let's continue by doing that. So my first quarter point is 0 minus pi over 3 will give me a negative pi over 3. Then pi sixths minus pi over 3, or 2 pi sixths, is going to give me a negative pi sixth. Then 2 pi sixths minus pi over 3, which with a common denominator is 2 pi sixths, which will give us 0. Then 3 pi sixths minus 2 pi sixths, which is pi over 3, which will give me 1 pi sixth. Then the last one, which is 4 pi sixths, minus pi thirds, which is 2 pi sixths, which will give us 2 pi sixths. Then we shift each quarter point over by the amount of pi thirds to the left, which will give us at negative pi thirds, then negative 2 to 0, to positive 2, to 0, to negative 2. Then I complete a smooth curve through those red points. And that represents the function of a negative 2 cosine 3x plus pi. Now what I want to do is verify my solution by plugging this into our calculator. I have a negative 2 cosine 3x plus pi. Let's set our window. Our x min is going to be a negative 2 pi over 3, which is our negative period. Our x max is going to be our positive period, which is 2 pi over 3. Our scale is going to be the quarter point, which is pi over 6. And our y min and y max are one above and below our amplitude, which is 2. So I have a negative 3 and 3. Now what we want to do is graph, and that should give us our function with the phase shift. Let's check our solution. Let's plug in a value of a negative pi over 3. And if the solution is correct, we should have that value equal to a negative 2. And it is, so therefore our function with the phase shift is correct. Let's follow the same procedures to complete our last example. Y equals 3 cosine x plus pi over 4. What we want to do first is to find the amplitude. The amplitude is the coefficient in front of our function, which is going to be the absolute value of 3, so it is 3. My period is going to be 2 pi divided by b, and here the value that is in front of my interior function is going to be a value of 1. Notice I didn't have to factor out the coefficient of my x because it already is 1. Therefore, I'm going to use that value of 1. So it's 2 pi over 1, which is 2 pi. Finding my quarter point is going to be my period times 1 over 4, which is going to give me pi over 2. Let's graph this function of y equals 3 cosine x. We'll do our phase shift after that. Here, my y-axis, my x-axis with an altitude of 3. And then I'm going to count by pi over 2. So pi over 2. 2 pi over 2, or just pi, 3 pi over 2, and then 4 pi over 2, or 2 pi. Since this is the cosine function, I'm going to start off the origin. In this case, the amplitude is 3, so I'll start at 3, and then follow the process of 0, negative 3, 0, and finally positive 3, finishing what I started with. And then we generate a smooth curve. Let's graph the function with the pi force phase shift. Remember to do that, I'm going to set the interior function x plus pi over 4 equal to 0, which gives me x equally a negative pi over 4. Therefore, my quarter points are going to move a pi force to the left, and I start with the first quarter point of 0. So 0 minus pi over 4 gives me a negative pi over 4. I have pi over 2 minus pi over 4. When I find a common denominator, that would be 2 pi over 4 minus pi over 4, which would be a positive pi over 4. Two pi over 2, which is just pi, or I could have 4 pi over 4 minus pi over 4, which would give me 3 pi over 4. Then 3 pi over 2, or 6 pi over 4, minus pi over 4 will give me 5 pi over 4. We have 2 pi, which when I find a common denominator will be 8 pi over 4 minus pi over 4, which gives me 7 pi over 4. Now, I just phase shift each one of these points over to the left by pi-fourths. So 3, 0, -3 to 0 to +3. Then I complete a smooth curve. So the red function is y equals 3 cosine x plus pi/4, while the blue function is y equals 3 cosine x without the phase shift. Let's graph the function to verify our solution. I have that set in my calculator. The window, of course, the x-min is a -2 pi, which is the period. The max is the positive 2 pi, which is the period. The scale is the quarter point, which is pi/2. My x-min and max is one above and below the amplitude. When I graph, I have a solution that is very familiar from what I graphed, and now what I'm going to do is to check a value to verify that I am correct. I'm going to test a negative pi-force, and what I should receive is a +3 value. And I do, therefore my graph is correct.